G'day, Lando Norris wins in front of his home crowd.
But more spectacularly, Nico Hulkenberg went from 19th to 3rd to snare his first ever podium.
British GP had it all, and for all the behind-the-scenes action, stick around. It was a sensational result for Lando Norris.
Huge support for the 4 British drivers, but the biggest support, definitely for Lando. And the fans in the Lando stand were richly rewarded with a win. Although unlike the Max stand in Austria, not everyone here wore their yellow shirt. Now that was included in the ticket price, and I would have thought everybody would have complied.
Now you probably saw the race and the podium on TV, so I'm going to jump straight to the celebration down in pit lane.
Of course, there were hugs galore before the team settled down for that photo. But have a look at this. After they've posed for that photo, this fellow's gone and done a Lando, but unfortunately with too much force and broken the bottle. But perhaps the more talked about incident was when Lando went to the fence to acknowledge the many thousands of fans still on the track. He went to climb on the fence, but unfortunately a photographer had been on the fence awaiting his arrival, came down and caused Lando some damage to his nose. Now I've never seen that before, but it was quite a whack he took to the face, and it certainly curtailed his intentions to get up on that stand. The fans were left disappointed, and Lando's going to end up with a scar on his nose. That's the second scar he's got, because you'll remember going back to King's Day in Amsterdam some time ago, he had that incident on board Martin Garrix's boat, and given what he's going to end up with, I thought this picture was rather apt.
Down to stand outside the McLaren hospitality suite to get a shot of the driver coming back from medical centre, but his dad said he was going to be some time, so I ended up cutting my losses.
But I did catch up briefly with the Crown Prince of Bahrain, who was there. He is, of course, heading up the Sovereign Wealth Fund, which owns the McLaren team, and he was pretty happy to be at the track on a day when the McLaren team scored a 1-2. I'll get to the second driver in just a moment.
But first, Nico Hulkenberg's first podium, the story we waited so long for.
I saw him close to getting a podium in Hockenheim in 2019, only to crash on the final corner in the wet. And standing in the queue for Parc Fermé, all I could think about was don't let that happen this race, and I reckon it would have been in the back of his mind as well.
Let's jump straight to the podium now, and I did think it was
Odd that neither of the McLaren drivers went to Nico and doused him in champagne. After all, it was his first podium, 239 races prior without one. I would have thought they would have made a bit more of a scene about it. Well, after that, I headed to the Sauber garage to await the celebration shot, and the mechanics were on fire, posing with the trophy, singing songs. In particular, they were doing a version of Freed from Desire. But instead of Freed from Desire, it was Nico's On Fire. And they only had 2 bottles of champagne for their celebration, but thankfully Mercedes came to their aid and provided them with a couple as congratulatory gifts. It was a wet and soggy affair, and Nico was in his element. And outside the TV pen earlier, Gabriel Bortoleto was effusive with his praise for Nico when he was speaking to Nico's manager, Raul.
It's a real joy to be around such excitement when things like this happen. And with Nico's first podium, a big jump in these sales of hand-signed and hand-numbered prints, which you'll find at the shop at kimillman.com. Now on to the sad story of the day, Oscar Piastri.
In the press conference, he was quite sullen, very careful with his words, did not want to incur a penalty, but very keen to get out of the joint. He still leads by 8 points. He was asked whether McLaren might protest the result, but he said he didn't think so. But quite frankly, if he'd lost that race to another team, well, they'd be appealing it big time. But taking it away from Lando at his home race, that would be a tough one. So I suspect Oscar now has a favour owing to him from the team.
And an interesting stat, Sauber has now scored more points in the last 4 races than Red Bull has, on a fraction of the budget.
Oh, and did you notice that this trophy is made of Lego? Yes, what a great marketing angle for that amazing brand.
Let's talk about celebrities at the race. This man was with us, Keanu Reeves.
He's working with Cadillac, seen here with Dan Towris doing an interview. Dan is the CEO. And word has it that Cadillac were at the track to talk to a number of people, including, I imagine, this man, Kevin Magnussen, who watched the race from the back of the Sauber garage. Mick Schumacher is also a name that popped up in the mix. Valtteri Bottas, I imagine, probably would have chatted with them as well. And they're operating from rather nondescript offices not too far from the entrance to the Silverstone track.
This race, Lewis Hamilton was in fashionable kit all 4 days.
He's certainly keeping us guessing as to which races he's going to come to the track in Ferrari kit or in fashionable gear.
The British Grand Prix is the biggest Formula One race of the year.
It also draws plenty of celebrities, the likes of Jeremy Clarkson. He was with McLaren for a bit of the day, certainly coming onto the grid with communications manager Mark Norris. Also there, Caleb Cooper, another star of Clarkson's Farm and a big fan of Oscar Piastri's. Celebrity chef Gordon Ramsay was here 2 days at least, and have a look at this. He's ended up coming out of a car which was doing a hot lap on the track, absolutely filthy. What was he doing? Well, if you haven't seen the clip, he was attempting food preparation in a car doing high speeds. Other famous people, and there were many: Ian Wright, footballer, Mel C, the sporty spice, and have a look at this story in the Mirror. They've used my picture, but the caption had me laughing. A Silverstone staff member, well, that's a Red Bull staff member, protected her from the rain by holding an umbrella above her head. I would have thought that was pretty obvious, but I guess no harm in being thorough. Skateboard aficionado Tony Hawk was doing some tricks in the paddock. And do you recognise this woman? This is Malala Yousaf, guest of Mercedes, maybe even Lewis, as she was seen at the back of the garage. But after that session, I saw her chatting with Lewis's manager, Mark Hines, next to the Mercedes engineering truck. You probably remember her. She was shot in 2012 by a Taliban gunman while on a bus returning from school in Pakistan. She's gone on to do great things.
Alex Albon's dad and sister were with us on the weekend.
Lewis Hamilton's brother Nicholas was in attendance, and his mum, I think, but I didn't get a picture of her. George's mum and dad were there, along with his nephew, I think. Oliver Behrman's sister with us, and Ollie actually went out to watch his brother's F4 race on Saturday night. And right now you're looking at Isaac Hadjar's parents.
In a moment I'll run through some of the more spectacular cars that were driven by drivers to the race, but first,
this series of pictures, it's not often that I get to photograph a spin or something spectacular like this, and originally I thought this was Pierre Gasly that crashed, so I put a post up on Instagram saying Pierre Gasly's had a spin and he's got back on the track, except later I had to change it because it was Franco Colapinto.
Then I had about half a dozen comments on the post from people going, "Oh, you just don't like Franco and you never put pictures of other people's spins up there." And given the fact that I thought this was Pierre, I think we can dispel that myth.
Now, see this signage here? This is sold by the event organiser, and I was told that some of these signs on big grandstands, and this is not the biggest, can sell for around $150,000 for a race. So that's good money if you can get it, I guess. Something a little bit smaller and artier. Ollie, who works for Red Bull, draws an image every race near the pit box, and this race, it was Paddington Bear.
What were some of the more interesting cars the F1 drivers drove to the track?
And remember too, most of them don't have very far to drive because they stay in this area, in motorhomes, and have a drive of perhaps kilometre and a half. The most spectacular, without a doubt, this car, a Mercedes C111, driven by George Russell, and interestingly, he drove this with the door up for the last at least 50 metres, had cameras everywhere on it. Delighted to see Lando driving a McLaren to the track, as did Zach Brown, his magnificent Speedtail, and a Porsche. One of the rare times I've seen a driver drive a Porsche to a track. In this case, Alex Albon, and it was his own private Porsche. Well, I should say Porsche for those who don't live in Australia.
Well, it's now quite noisy here in the Moxie Milton Keynes Hotel foyer, so I'm going to wrap this up. A reminder that if you haven't already subscribed, here's your chance to do so. And for a whole lot of extra content, head across here and have a look. Thanks for watching, and stay passionate. I think we can put that issue. And given the fact